How does this play out now as we think about common equity prices and as we think about goodwill? So as I move past this for a second, as I go on for a few minutes here, now I'm going to be revisiting some of what we talked about last week. Okay, you'll notice that normally I'm going to start a week off by talking about what we dealt with the week before and then move on. In this case, I moved on, and now we're going to back up. So remember the values we had from last week that brought us to the common value of 1.697, or 1.697 and 0.85 for common equity and preferred, which were meaningfully lower values than the price that we were seeing in the market of 4 1/8 and 2 1/2. Now we may have to think about that in a few minutes, but kind of follow through with me. If I look at this, my enterprise value actually goes down in this whole share repurchase scenario. These are my values for common and debt. Here's preferred, here's cash. So my enterprise value equation, market value common, preferred, debt minus cash, actually, it doesn't go down. It actually went up from 288 to 292. So it went up by about 4 million in my just basic enterprise value equation. We know that my valuation equation also went up by not quite the same dollar. Okay. Here, if you want to, as you look at this scenario, you can be reminded how we got here, and this slide is up on Canvas for you. This is what we looked at last week. And if we think about the pre-share repurchase estimates, you'll remember these numbers. We were at a 149.36. We had a conversion rate of 2 to 1, and then we had 55.7 million common outstanding. This was our market value of debt at 58.7, balance on sheet cash at 10.93. If we then include into that common the 4.3 million shares converted at a 2 to 1 ratio, so 55.7 common gets an additional effective common of 2.15. That's the 4.3 million shares adjusted for the conversion ratio. We're at 57.85 million shares. And that took us to a equity, market value of the equity of 98.165. That's how we got the $1.69 or $1.70 per common share value. So this was all before the repurchase. We got those values. After the repurchase, what happens? Well, even before the repurchase, you walk through goodwill by going through this process of calculating goodwill, and we had 26.23 of goodwill. This is all before. So we had 98.165 of equity. We had 26.23, 26.25 of goodwill. This is before the repurchase. Now let's look at what happens after repurchase. If our enterprise value goes to 152.25, our common shares outstanding went down by 5 million, right? Because we bought 5 million of them back. So even with the 4.3 million of preferred and the 2 to 1 conversion ratio, we go to a reduced number of shares of effective common of 52.85. The market value of the debt went up, the cash stayed constant. And if we then work that into market value of equity, our market value of equity goes down from 98.165 to 83.436. The market value, or the estimated value of the company, went up from 149.36 to 152.25. The estimated value of the company went up. The enterprise value of the company went up to what? 292 from 288. But the market value of the equity went down in this case. Well, we can work through, that means the market value of the preferred went down as well. The per share price of the common went down from 167 to 158 almost. The preferred went from 0.85 to 0.79. Okay, that makes sense to us if it's all gone down. Goodwill, if we work it through our funnel again, went from 26 to 32. So Goodwill went up. Okay. What should we make of this? Why did the per share price rise when the per share value fell? Remember, the per share price went from 4 1/8 to 4.2 when we did the share repurchase in the market. But the per share value went from 1.7 or 1.6969 to 1.57, I think it was. Why did the price rise and the value fell? Any thoughts? Okay, so I'm going to ask you another question that's on my list sooner than I might have otherwise. Would Mirage Ravana have been a good candidate for a share buyback? What do you think? Had a price per share of 4.12. That went up to 4.2, or at least we would agree it went up as it had to buy, as it bought shares back in the marketplace because more demand and supply was falling. So the price went up, right? But the value fell. Would Mirage Ravana, given what we know about it, have been a good candidate for a share repurchase? I don't think so. In fact, I think it wouldn't have been, because if nothing else, we knew at the time that it made the repurchase, its value per share of common was 1.7. The price was 4 1/8, right? Would you ever pay 4 1/8 for something you valued at 1.7? No, we dramatically overvalued this. Okay, so we'd never have done it. So Mirage Ravana wouldn't have been a good candidate for a share buyback, which is why you see that the share value fell even more. Okay, so we've applied these concepts to a company that wasn't a good candidate for it. But do we ever have this happen in the marketplace? And I'm going to tell you, yeah, we do. Now, maybe not as egregiously as we're seeing it here, but I'll tell you that we do. Think about why corporate executive or corporate decision makers make the decisions they make. Why is it that the CEO of the company might possibly have said, yes, let's go ahead with this share buyback?
Because often their compensation can be like related to either the value of the company or if like having the price of the stock increase. So even if the value fell, if the price increases, then
that's exactly right. It's exactly right. Enterprise value increased. If the share value became reflective of 4.2, that represented an increase as well. Even without that, we saw that the market value or the enterprise value increased. So in either one of those, we see that we probably are handing out or satisfying the needs of some of the bonus plans for our senior management. And senior management will make those decisions that are in their best interest, right? Now, we've tried to have compensation plans, stock options, bonuses, salary combined, such that we try to align the interests of management and other stakeholders. But we don't get that perfectly, right? So I think you have to think about the effects in the marketplace of this kind of engineering. Sometimes, as Megan pointed out, they may not be all that legal. Sometimes they may be skirting the line. Or sometimes they're completely legal and bring about nothing but positive outcomes. I'm going to move for just a moment to the Farm Hill case. I'll go to Leschkal Industries, excuse me. This is the one you guys are dealing with now. And for Leschkal, then we see that we've got some price per shares of common. And do we even have any, no, we don't have preferred, okay. So we've got a market cap of common at 45,525. We got 5 million shares outstanding. So, and I haven't run these numbers. We're going to kind of do this simultaneously with each other. Let's make an assumption that we're going to buy back some of our common shares. Let's see what it does to us. Now, somebody make a note of this. In fact, I'll help us here. I'm going to say that we've got a value. I'll do it without the adjustments. We've got a value of this at 55,239. I'm just going to type that in here so we don't lose the number. And what's our WACC? Our WACC's 15.62. Okay, I'm only putting these here so I can keep the numbers as we make some changes. So now let's go to the financial statement. So let's make an assumption. Let's assume we buy back 1 million shares of common. So that would cost us what? If they're 9.1 each, so that's going to be $9.1 million. Let's say that it costs us $9.5 million to buy them back. Would that be reasonable, do you think? You're knocking? Is that an agreement or is that no?
Yeah, that's sign language for yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. So if 9.5 million, we're buying back 1 million shares, that's $9.50 a share. So this shares outstanding will move down to 4 million. And the per share price is going to go to 9.5. Okay, so we've changed the market cap. And we're gonna have to also change the market value of our debt. Okay, I've changed the market value of my equity. Okay. I've changed the market value of my equity here by changing the shares outstanding and the price per share. And I need to change the market value of my debt. Remember, it was going to go up by $9.5 million. So this we're going to have to add 9.5 to this. It goes up rather a lot, right? So that's going to change my weights. And let's then suppose we had some change in costs as well. So my cost of debt was 8%. What do you think we should take it to? Well, we more than doubled our debt. I'm going to run it to 10%. I don't think that'd be unrealistic. The banker is nodding his head.
But so when you're doing that, are you just guessing the numbers? Are you just like, okay, I'm going to try 10%, or is it like?
On some of this, that's exactly what I'm doing, Martin. Just like we guessed that we could buy shares at 9.5. They were trading at 9.1, and we guessed that we would have to pay up for them to 9.5. And we're guessing that if we're borrowing more, we're going to have to increase the cost of our debt. I'm certain the bank won't loan us at 8% when we're increasing the cost of our debt so dramatically. So I'm going to increase it to 10%. Now I'm guessing here, it's a WAG, right? But it's a relatively well-informed WAG from some experience. So I think it's probably fairly realistic.
And so in an exam, in the exam, would we have to guess a number or like say, okay, I mean, regarding the situation, I think 10% would be good, or would we have to do that, something similar?
So you would have to do one of two things. You would either be given the values that these would change to, or you might be put in a position where I ask you to estimate what you think it would be, and then that would simply be a guess. And as long as your numbers that relied on that guess were accurately calculated, then I probably would accept it. Now, if you said that no, they were borrowing money at 8%, they can increase their debt level without their cost going up, I don't think that'd be a plausible answer, right? Or if you said they borrowed at 8% and they can more than double their cost or more than double their debt level and it'll only go up by 0.1%, I don't think that would be plausible. I also don't think it'd be plausible it went up to 20%. So it'd have to be something within a realistic range, right? It's got to make sense, just kind of a litmus test.
Okay.
Okay. All I'm doing right now is kind of going through another scenario for you to see what happens to value, okay? And then we'll compare value and price perhaps. So if cost of debt goes up to 10%, and I'm going to say cost of equity probably is going to go up as well. I think beta is going to change here. Where do I have my those inputs? Got beta at 1.2. Let's say it moves to 1.3. So my WACC, which remember was at 15.62, now has fallen to 14.76. Okay? So less than a 1% change in the cost of capital. What's it do to the value of the company as we value it? Well, we were at 55,239. The value moves to 63.95. The value moves by about $8 million, $7.8 million, by a less than 1% change in cost of capital. That's how dynamic the cost of capital is in the valuation equation. That's how sensitive the valuation outcome is to the cost of capital. So if you could get a 0.5% improvement on your cost of capital, would you do it? And I would say more than likely, yes. It wouldn't have given us 7.8 million in this case. Maybe it will only given us $3 million. But that's not trivial, is it? So this is just an example of some financial engineering. I've worked it from two different company standpoints and shown you how you can model this or play around with it on your spreadsheets. Tried to walk you through it conceptually, walked you through so you can understand how it affects not only the value per share, but the price per share. And the price per share was affected as we identified, excuse me, how much it cost us in the open market to buy the number of shares we were purchasing. In the Mira-Dravana case, we bought 5 million shares for 21 million. In this case, we bought 1 million shares for 9.5 each, so $9.5 million. Okay, but that market transaction sets the price. The change in the discount rate changes the value, and you always have to then take it from a overall value standpoint to a value per share standpoint. I haven't done those numbers here. You can easily do them. We can then take this value minus, and then we use that value as though it was enterprise value and say that this 63,095 then is equal to the market cap of equity plus the market value of debt, which we saw the adjustment on debt a moment ago, plus or minus cash. We can reverse engineer that to find the new market value of equity. We can divide that now by the number of shares outstanding that we had and come up with our new value per share. So let's look at that for this company for just a second as the last thing we'll do here. So we've got 63,095 in our new calculated enterprise value. Let's then, if we rearrange the enterprise value equation, we can say enterprise value minus debt plus cash is equal to equity, right? Enterprise value minus debt plus cash. Well, what was the market value of our debt? So we'll take from the 63,095 and we'll minus 16,456. Now we're going to add cash on the balance sheet at 920. And so we've got we've got the market value of our estimate, or what our value of our equity should be, and that brought me to 47,559. So our equity should be at 47,559. I'm going to divide that by 4 million shares, and it took me to a market value or a valuation per equity share of 11.88, almost 11.89. Well, we had a value improvement to 11.89. We bought them back at 9.5. Do you think we made a good decision?
Yes.
Sure, because the market has undervalued this company, as opposed to in the Mira-Dravana case, the market had overvalued. And we see the market's valuation at the price. Any questions? Do you think you could take an example and work it through to find these kinds of numbers? I think if you followed my PowerPoint, which is already posted online, you could. Okay? I think you could. All right. Any questions about where we've been today?
Sorry. I feel like I could run the numbers, but making the decision at the end, I don't know. I'm kind of lost with all like what does what and like.
Okay. So Martin, I think actually making the decision at the end is easier than running the numbers. So the decision at the end might be as easy as when we identified the price that we had to pay per share, we compare it to the value per share that we calculate. If the price that we have to pay is greater than the value, would you go ahead and execute the transaction? If the price you would have to pay, our cost, is greater than the value, would you execute the transaction?
No.
No, because it would result in a negative net present value, right? If the cost is greater than the value. And you know that if a negative net present value, at the very least, your internal rate of return will be less than your discount rate. Now, in the case of Marijuana, it would have taken us to a negative return, not just a lesser return, but a negative return. That the numbers were so egregious. So I think that your decision intuition is probably better than you suppose. I'll go ahead and I will do a worksheet of these spreadsheets that walks you through for that particular company what the PowerPoint walks you through. And I'll send that to you guys. I think I might make it a little bit easier for you then as well.
Thank you.
In fact,
for the ICP?
Well, do you want me to do it for the ICP or do you want me to do it for Marijuana, since that's what we're using our examples from? Let me do it with Marijuana. I say that because I'm almost done with it. I was trying to get that finished this morning before our class started. I just didn't get that far. So I'll finish that up and I'll send that to you. I think I've already shared the Marijuana Excel sheet with you, haven't I? I know I have. Yeah. So I'll send you an update on with that new sheet. Okay. And we'll talk about this a little bit more on Wednesday, which means that you're going to need to play with that a little bit so we can have a better conversation on Wednesday.